Tickets on sale now.
Lens Rentals versus Lenny's Rentals. Difference number 16.
At Lens Rentals, we have the largest inventory of rental equipment in the world for photographers and videographers.
At Lenny's Rentals, we have all best brands. Sony, Nikon, Leica, Canon, Fujifilm.
World's largest inventory. Just one more reason to use Lens Rentals.
Pentax e Android.
LensRentals.com. Shoot with the best.
Hello, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 12 of the Midwest Gaming Classic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Garris, Panel Director of the Midwest Gaming Classic. Join the man known as the father of adventure games, Scott Adams, as well as David A. Rodriguez, an Associate Narrative Director for one of today's biggest adventure games, Diablo IV. Historian Martin Goldberg will moderate this journey, exploring the differences in how early games were made compared to the games of today. And you know what? Enough of me talking. Why don't we get to the podcast?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this presentation and panel at the Midwest Gaming Classic. I'm industry historian and co-founder of the show, Martin Goldberg. Thank you all of you for attending in general and coming to this. Today we're going to be talking with David Rodriguez from Blizzard. You're currently assistant creative director. That's correct. And Scott Adams, often referred to as the father of adventure gaming. They're going to be covering a bit on what, from Scott's period to David's, what has happened with adventure gaming, how it has evolved. We're going to start a bit though with both of their beginnings and their contrasts, because they obviously represent two very different periods in time. So Scott, why don't you start it out and how you got into wanting to do adventure games?
Hi all, everybody enjoying the show? Awesome place, isn't it? And my compliments to the founders. We have one of them here, I notice. This show just gets bigger and bigger every year. Okay, I'm like last century guy. Sometimes I've been referred to as the OG of indie developers, because when I started writing computer games, there were no computer games because there were no computers, which made it kind of rough. Literally, I was writing, I had to build my own computer first before I could write a game on it, and I did that. But mostly we're here to talk about adventures and how I got into that. I got my first, what I call an appliance computer, back in 1977. It was a Radio Shack TRS-80, and it had a whopping giant 16K of memory. I think I write emails that are bigger than that today. And I wanted to write a game for it. And so my thought was, what can I put in there? It's got a brand new language in it, something called BASIC by this little startup company out somewhere in the West Coast that I had heard about, someplace called Microsoft. And I thought, oh wow, I gotta see what BASIC can do, because I was a machine language, assembly language, Fortran, COBOL programmer at that time. So I got the computer, I read the BASIC, and one of the things in there that really intrigued me was something called strings. It was for BASIC, a new modern concept where the computer language could handle the English language. You could manipulate English. So I wanted to write a game that did something with English. And about the same time, I was working at Stromberg Carlson, and I was a programmer for one of the first digital central offices for telephones. Anyway, the IT department got a copy of Colossal Caves, the very first original adventure games, Crowther and Woods. Found out about it, got permission to play it, came in every morning before work, spent every night after work for about a week until I beat it. And I thought about it. This is a kind of a text-based game. I'd like to do something like that on my Radio Shack. I even mentioned it to one of my friends at work. They had a laugh. They just laughed at me. They said, your toy computer cannot run this program. It's gigantic. It's running on a mainframe. And my thought was, I'm not going to write this game. I'm going to write a game like it. And so that's where I started. And I literally had to invent the tools to write the game as I went along. I wrote a language to write the game in. I wrote a compiler to compile the language. I wrote an editor to edit the language. And I made up the language as I went along. And that's how Adventureland was born. I just started right there with, you're in a forest, all you can see here are trees. For those of you who haven't played the game, it was very, very primitive. The text was extremely primitive. Remember, I'm working in a 16K universe. I had to have not only the entire game in there, I had to have the interpreter running the game and everything else. So it was quite a challenge. So that was the beginning of the first adventure game. Things I think have changed a bit, haven't they, David?
Oh, well, I'm sitting next to you and you're like, well, I invented this language, I created this tool, and I'm like, okay, well, it's my turn. I was a musical theater major. I created no tools. And when I started in video games, there really weren't schools yet, like with specialties, but growing up, obviously I played all of the adventure games, the text games. I was on MUDs, to date myself a little more, all the King's Quest games, and so...
MUDs, by the way, are multi-user dungeons. Anyone ever play a MUD?
Yeah, it's like WoW, but everything is
we got some
text.
fans out there.
Yeah, you had to read everything. So that's where I started, and I would play Dungeons and Dragons and those kind of games, and I would write my own adventures. And then when I got to college and I settled into the theater department, our school had a really cool program called the 3 Penny program. And it allowed students to put on their own shows, and we got a small budget and access to all of their equipment. And so I wrote and directed 4 or 5 shows while I was there, and I think while doing that I learned a lot about working with artists, getting projects to completion, so a lot of the skills that directly translate over to like the large team building, which is very different from we were just talking about, but like so managing all of these groups, getting them to all sort of row in the same direction and finish a creative project was a very valuable tool that I learned while working in the theater, and somehow that translated into video games. I applied for a job as an associate designer with a small company in Chicago, and my portfolio was like, here's my original RPG, here's some dialogue from some of the plays I wrote, and here's 5 pages of a comic book. And I was like, and then I took a test. I wrote a pitch for a video game called, the test was you have to write a video game pitch for Car Washer the video game. And they said that it was the best car wash pitch they ever got. And I was like, oh, neat.
Did they ever do anything with it?
Oh, no, they burned it immediately, I'm sure. But they were like, that was a really good car wash pitch. So I got the job primarily as to do level design and write all of the scripts for a game called Ground Control Dark Conspiracy, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is one of the worst titles for a game ever. Like just redundant with its like 90s emo-ness, like it's dark conspiracy, like it's a very, like conspiracy should be dark on its own, like right, like that's what it is. You don't need to modify it. But I wrote all the cinematics, I wrote the dialogue, and I just seemed to have a natural fit into the process of working with the other teams. And then my very next project, because there's only 2 designers in the company at the time, and no writing specialties, I got field promoted to lead of Hunter the Reckoning, the Xbox game. And so they're like, now you're lead, and I didn't know enough, just like when I was doing the plays, I didn't know enough to not know that it should be like really much harder, because I was like, I just started.
What was the time frame?
I think it was my second year of development that I became lead of that game. So in hindsight, it's terrifying. But at the time, I was too young and dumb to know that we shouldn't be doing. We were building the engine as we went too. So everything we did was wrong.
Where were you living? Where was this?
This is in Chicago. Yeah, high voltage software.
Oh, cool. So that's kind of this neck of the woods. By the way, where I was down in Florida. So we got Chicago. Hi, I see some Florida fans there. I live in Wisconsin now, which is kind of surprising. Platteville, for those interested. Give me some notice before you drop by there.
So, interesting point. I mean, when you started, you basically had a team of one.
I did, or a half, really, because I was still working at the time, and this was all just spare time, fun hobby.
And your generation team of many to get that done. So, if you guys could compare and contrast, basically what's involved in your time versus your time from overview of coming up with a game concept and seeing it to a finished product. So if you want to,
I'm sorry, I didn't get the whole question.
so if you could elaborate in your time frame, what was involved in coming up from concept to finished product? as
Okay,
a single developer?
good. Let me just start the very first one, because that was the prototype for what I did afterwards. I was Adventureland. And as I mentioned, I was creating my tools as I went along. And it was like Colossal Caves. I decided to make it a treasure hunt because that's what Colossal Caves was, a treasure hunt underground. So what I did for concept was, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to make it so I got to find treasures, got to save them away somewhere. Okay, so that I've got a goal. How many treasures am I going to have? I don't know. Let's just see where this goes. I literally developed it organically, where I would build a room. I'm in a forest. Okay, a forest. Well, I need to put some items in the room. What goes in the forest? Oh, I got it. Trees. Okay. Great. I got forest. I got trees. Colossal Caves had already put in the concept that you could go in directions to leave a room, north, south, east, and west. So I put directions to my room, north, south, east, and west. Okay, where are they going to take you? I don't know if anyone's ever played Adventureland. How many people have played? We got at least one player out here. Two. It was kind of unfair to the player, I see in retrospect, but it was just a shortcut for me. What I did for that very first room was I connected north out of the forest to the forest, right back to itself. West out of the forest, right back to the forest. South, right back to the forest. The only way out of the forest was you had to go east. For whatever reason, people playing the game would never go east. They'd go north, they'd go south, they'd go west. And my playtesters would just wander around for 10 minutes going, well, what do? I'm stuck in this forest. Go east. Okay, so what do I do next? I don't want to tell them what to do. I've got to come up with something different. I got trees. What can I do with trees? One of my playtesters tried to climb the tree, and it was, to me, a light bulb went off. Of course, let them manipulate objects, do things with it. So they climbed up the tree. At the top of the tree, you found a spider web, and if you got where you could look at items, if they looked closely at the web, it said it had writing on it. Imagine that, a literate spider. So it's a magic land, what can I say? And so you'd read the web and it would say, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You could, when you got to the top of the tree, it said, I'm on the top of a tree. To the east I see a meadow, beyond that a lake. So it gave them the clue of where to go. The spider comes later, different tree, sorry, same game, wrong tree. Anyway, I built the game slowly but surely. I kept adding rooms, I added in treasures, the player got to score them, until eventually I decided to stop. Why did I decide to stop? I ran out of memory. 16K, had to hold the entire adventure. on the average, people that play, do you remember how long it took you to play Adventureland? Does anyone? A couple of hours? A few hours? I've had people play it for a week or two, depending on how much time they put into it and how stuck they got on some of the puzzles. Well, you what? You had the handbook. Oh, okay. That does make it easier. Anyway, so for me, I had a game. It was done. Now what do I do with it? There was a magazine out at that time called Softside. It was a fan magazine. It was not full size. It was like the quarter the size of a regular magazine, literally, size of a paperback book with not as many pages. And it had a few ads in it, and a few articles, and in the very back it had a classified section. And I went, oh, I wonder if I could sell my game back there. And so I did. I listed it for sale, gave a very short blurb on it, and set a price of $14.95, and people started ordering it, which was kind of cool. That was the beginning, the real beginning of Adventure International, and I called it Adventure International. I was selling it just because it sounded so big. Literally, by the time Adventure International went out of business, we had presence from Japan to Italy. We really were international, but this was in the very early days. And after that, it would take me on the average of a month to 6 weeks to write a new adventure game. Every time I wrote a game, I tried to do something different than I'd done in a previous game. I increased the power of my language to do things, and always tried to do things that were new. And as people played these games, they enjoyed them, they wanted more, and sales kept growing. So it was one-man operation until I got to about the third game, and the orders are coming in. I can't make the tapes fast enough because literally we're making them by hand. So I had to hire one of my coworkers' wives, who was a housewife that was available to start helping, and that was my first employee. I'll give a shout out in case she ever sees this. It's Linda Novak. She's still around, but that was the beginning of Adventure International as a commercial success, actually becoming a business. And the amazing thing was, my wife was home one day, stay at home, I was working. She got a call from a fellow who wanted to buy 25 tapes, and he was from a very far off land that I had heard about. I'd never been there because I was a Florida boy. Grew up in Florida. He lived in the mythical land of Chicago. And he wanted 25 tapes. And she said, fine, we'll ship them to you. That'll be 25 times $15. And he said, no, I'm a Radio Shack dealer and I want to resell these. You have to give me a discount. We do? Why? We learned about wholesaling. It was literally the beginning of a crash business course. And it went from there. So, like I said, in the very beginning, I was probably one of the first indie developers that ever existed because I was inventing the tools to make the tools, learning the business all from the ground up and doing everything all at once. By the time Adventure International was at its peak, our best year we did $3 million and had around 30 employees. So we did grow. We also crashed and burned in the 80s, but that's another story entirely. So now, back to you.
Oh, sure. So again, it's very different now. Even when I started, there was at least 20 to 40 people on even a small team of making a game. Getting games done is very different. So at my first studio that I was working, we were not a large company. So what we did, and a lot of developers still do, is you have to make pitches and bid on games to have publishers then give you the money to make those games on their timeline and things like that. And so you had to be either the best or the cheapest or the fastest on the pitches to get those titles awarded to your studio, and then you would make them. And then once they come into the studio, the kind of game you're making is already kind of set. Like you already know you're going to be making, like when we got the Hunter the Reckoning game, we knew it was going to be like a gauntlet style 4-player beat 'em up game set in the Hunter world. Like that was already done. And so the parts that we get to decide is sort of like that box is shaped for us, and then we get to define all the pieces inside the box, but we normally aren't the people saying, this is what the box shape is. And as you get further into the industry or larger, that box gets bigger, like when you get to work on games that like Skylanders, even on Skylanders, which was a great franchise, you know that it has to have toys, and it has to hit this age bracket, and it has to be about this long, it has to have this many levels, and so a lot of those parameters are set either by previous games, by expectations, by the financial people who are like, in order to charge this much, we need to have this much content, and so on and so forth. And so a lot of those things I don't get to touch. Like those are not the areas that I affect. One of the other things that is very helpful in game development that we talked about earlier is you have to work with other people a lot. And you have to work with creative people. Creative people are very passionate all the time. Like just, they wake up and they've played a game or they have an idea, and you have to handle all of that stuff. I feel you have to handle it properly and with respect. Even if you're not going to use those ideas, you have to be able to ingest those ideas and be able to explain either like, that's great, we don't have time for that, that's great, it doesn't work for this game, it's not so great, go back and work on an idea, but you have to treat all of those with respect because they're all contributing a part of themselves to that game as well. It's a huge tower that you're all building together, or in our case, Hunter, you're building the plane while it's flying, or whatever the metaphor is, and you don't want everyone, you want everybody to feel like the amount of time and effort that they're putting into this has value, because we spend so much time and so much energy. Like nobody gets into this industry because they're like, I want to be, well, they don't stay. They don't do this to be rich. They do it because they are passionate about creating. And so you have to kind of respect that as you're going forward. So cross-discipline is a new thing, is challenging. And then inter-studio also. So like you're partnered with other studios and you are working with them across the country, different time zones, and trying to still maintain that level of collaboration and respect across those things. And so there's different balancing acts with all of those things too.
How long did it take to get that game out?
Which one?
The Hunter.
Oh man, that was way too long ago to remember. I think we did it in 16 months from start to finish, which is a bad plan. I just want everyone to know that. That's a bad idea. I slept under the desk a lot. It was way too short. I did spend, like you hear the stories about people sleeping in their office, and I had one of those chairs that folded out into a single bed. We slept there. Yeah. So we don't do that anymore. That was unhealthy, by the way. Like that's not a thing you're supposed to do. But like you're in your 20s, like I love games, and you're doing it. So we make sure everybody rests now and they don't kill themselves to make these. So that's, I think, one of the major differences is just...
So quite a difference from my 6-week turnaround to a 16-month turnaround.
And other games can take, like Skylander games I think ran a little longer, like maybe 2.5 years, and you get to the bigger games which have hundreds of employees, not counting like your marketing team and all those other things, that can run up to 4 or 5 years.
So another question I have, and this is one that you guys would be able to answer in reverse direction, so to speak.
Okay.
So, Scott, from where you're sitting in time frame, not just right here, looking forward, what is your opinion of what you've seen, how adventure games are now, how they develop, how it relates to when you first started, and how you basically first started in the industry? Beyond just, they're obviously graphical now, and there were text back then. Right? The concepts, the way the games flow, the way they've taken your concepts has evolved. And for you, what is your opinion looking back? What do you see that's still being carried forward, that's still the same from his time period? Some of the ideas and concepts, and how you've seen things in your time be elaborated on as well from that into the past.
Okay. Am I going first?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So I have a deep affection for all of those games, like the text-based games. Pirates Gold is still one of the greatest games ever made. And so the idea of sort of the player agency and discovery, and just like you were saying, like climbing up the tree and like being able to interact with the world and feeling like the world is responding to that, was created then, and that is still something we try to do now, is make sure that anything the player wants to do is at least we respond to it. Like the game acknowledges that that's happening. Even if you can't do it, like the character's like, I can't do that. But we tried, like we let you know that we did take that into account. And so we try to make the player feel as immersed in the game as possible, and you do that by making the world responsive. And I think that is something that we take all the way back to adventure games. Playtesting, like the fact that you thought to like get playtesters, I think is amazing, because I think back then it would not have occurred to me if I was making it that I need to like, oh, before I sell it, I should let other people try this. And so we do that now. Like there's still QA and playtesting, and there are still bugs. There are still times you can get lost in the forest in the games and never find your way out unless you go east. So I think that is still there, but I think a lot of the groundwork that was laid in all of those games is still there in the games that we do now. Like there's still like the graphical fidelity, and there's still the cutscenes and all those other things, but I think what they were able to do just with text is to create an emotional connection with the player, that they cared about what was going to happen next, what was in the game, and that is something we still try to achieve now when we're making games, is to build an emotional connection so that they care about what they're doing and what is going to happen next in the game. So I think that, other than just, like we can say systems and interaction, but like I think that part is the most important thing we took away from those kind of games.
One of the challenges I had when I was doing the first game was due to very limited memory. I couldn't have a lot of messages to communicate with the player, so I had to literally take pieces of messages and sort of weave them together. I found like I was saying, I was a lot, because it was the first person. So I would have a message that was just I was. And then I would chain it to something else. I was standing in a field type thing. So piece by piece I was putting things together. There was no compression to do that.
We still run out of memory, by the way. Like that's not new. We're out of memory. We have to like truncate things.
3 gigabytes, 10 gigabytes. You can now buy terabyte SanDisks. I mean, this was unreal back at that point. 16K was gigantic. I remember one of the first computers I built from scratch, and it was a Sphere, S-P-H-E-R-E. Look it up. It was a time of the Altair, but it was the first complete computer that was sold for the home, literally, with keyboard, monitor, and so forth. Anyway, the machine had no graphics. It was a text-only based machine. I invented a graphics card for it. And it was one giant board with 2102s, which are 1K chips. So I had to have chains of them to get the 16K I was shooting for. The problem with the low memory also meant that when I was describing something or doing something with my players, I had to describe things that they were familiar with. I had to use words that were common. I had to use references that were common. And I wasn't trying to connect emotionally as much as I was just trying to get them to understand what the story was. So in the first game, it's kind of hodgepodge Adventureland. There are lots of places and lots of things, but they really don't tie together, except that they're all fantasy. A few years ago, I brought out a tribute to Adventureland. It's called Adventureland XL. It was for the 40th anniversary of Adventureland, so the XL stood for 40th. It had the entire original game in it. It also stands for extra large. because it has the full, complete, original game in it. But when you finish that, you go into the extra large section. And there, the storytelling is a little more tied together. There are ways to connect with people emotionally, and one of them that I enjoy is humor. And I tried to have humor in my games. I've heard many things from players about how they played the games and the parts that stuck with them. And I heard a story that got me realizing that humor really is important. Part of the thing with the original Adventureland game, keep in mind, very short memory space. So I had a vocabulary of words you can understand, verbs and nouns. 2 words, that was a 2-word game. An action verb and a noun. I want to run north, or I want to take axe, that sort of thing. Okay, well, that takes up storage, all those words. So what I did was I only used the first 3 letters of a word, and they could type anything they wanted. Part of the puzzle on Adventureland is eventually you meet a bear that's on a log, on a chasm, up on a ledge, and you want to get past the bear. And what I wanted the player to do was to yell at the bear. And it would reply, the bear is so startled, he falls off the ledge. Originally, I had the bear fall off the ledge, and later you find the dead bear at the bottom of the canyon. I see a grimace, yes! And I got that from my playtesters. Why did I kill the bear? That is so cruel. So later, I changed it. The game evolved. It became a slightly woozy bear at the bottom of the chasm. But it goes further. The humor aspect comes in. So you can yell at the bear, and then other people started screaming at the bear. S-C-R-E-A-M, they would scream. So I put that in as a synonym for yell. But of course I only used S-C-R and Y-E-L, so those are the ways you could startle the bear. And then I get a letter in the mail that just broke me up. And I realized, okay, I can have fun with these things, just see where it goes. They said they worked on that bear for hours, and they did it as a team. It was a bunch of people playing together. They'd yell over each other's shoulder what to do with the bear. And finally, one of them said, just screw the bear. And they typed it in. They said, the bear is so startled, he fell off the ledge. SCR. So humor is another way to connect with their players. Another one I had was a mongoose you find early on in the game. And, well, golly, I don't know about you, but growing up as a kid, I remember mongoose were snake killers. And sure enough, later, near the very end of the game, you've got a snake that is protecting the treasure that you need to get to. So you drop the mongoose on the ground, and you know what happened? Breaks the 4th wall. The comment is, oops, I made a mistake. I guess it wasn't a mongoose. And then you read the scenery, and it says, I'm in a meadow, there's a treasure here, and a dead squirrel. So I tried to keep things tongue-in-cheek, keep them light, and also connect. But it took a while for me to understand it. That was the second adventure I wrote. So every time I wrote a game, I tried to learn from the previous games and go from there. So it was definitely an ongoing process and very organic. And once again, I was a developer of one, but I had a deep pocket of local playtesters, people who enjoyed playing my games. One of them was Neil Novak. Remember Linda Novak? Well, her husband Neil turned out to be one of my best beta testers. He would take a tall glass of water, sit in front of the game, and just play it to death. And he didn't want any hints. And he would do things, and I'd be madly scribbling away, going, oh, that gives me an idea of something to happen here. And occasionally I would say, well, pretend that they took that and just said this. What would you do? And on he would go, and on I would keep writing. I can't stress playtesting enough, because ultimately, you're really not writing the game for yourself, you're writing the game for the player. If the player isn't enjoying it, then you're not connecting. And I want my games to connect, so that's why I did it. By the way, Adventureland, for those interested, is Adventureland XL is actually on Steam, but all my classic original games are out there on the web. If you want to play them, the original ones are there. Everything except for the ones that I licensed from Marvel. Spider-Man, Hulk. I was actually the very first ones ever to do Marvel characters in computer games, which was kind of unique. I'm still kind of writing games, but sort of semi-retired, but every time I go to a show like this, it's like I'm itching to get back in front of the computer again and do something.
I'll give you a little more time. Do you have any interesting stories similar to that? Reference to Diablo IV or any of the other games you've been involved with that you think the audience would like to hear?
All right. So I'm going to do this one because we talked about it yesterday, and so at least I don't have to pick up a new one. So Skylanders. Does anybody remember Skylanders? Toys of Life? Thank you. So Skylanders was my first experience with a sort of blockbuster level game, right? Like the one that was ubiquitous when I got to it. So the first one I did was the third one, which was Skylanders Swap Force. And what was amazing about that was I didn't understand it when I started. Like I was like, oh, it's toys, it's cute, it's neat, it's gonna be fun. And then they were like, okay, we're gonna go into Manhattan and we're gonna have a street party for Skylanders. And I was like, okay, like that seems reasonable. Like that's a thing people do. So we go there, but they've like taken over the street. Like the entire front of Toys R Us is like, they built like this canopy, this interior for playing games. They invited like celebrities to come, and it was freaking me out. Like I was not prepared to be like playing Skylanders with Cyclops from X-Men. I don't know, again, like I don't know, he didn't know why he was there. Like his agent was like, yeah, you're gonna go play Skylanders. But he was super nice, and it was overwhelming to kind of be in that space. And I was there for the New York Comic Con as well, like demoing the game. And we had taken over all of Toys R Us, like all the front of Toys R Us was Skylanders, and people lined up at midnight, and the NASDAQ building, you guys know what the NASDAQ is, like the big digital building? They're showing like a commercial for Skylanders. So I'm just in the street, like in Times Square, like looking at it, and I was like, what is my life? Because I'm from like the south side of Chicago, and like thinking at that level of like reaching people had never occurred to me as like growing up. And so to be able to do that, realizing how important this game was to children and to their families, like seeing all of them, it was just like something I'm gonna remember like for the rest of my life. And so like being able to connect with people emotionally, they weren't just toys, you know, they're more important. So it still gets me, so sorry.
Okay, for this live session, we're going to open up the floor to questions if anybody has any.
I recently completed Pirate Cove / Pirate Adventure on the Atari Lynx system. You authorized a port to that on the Mega Pack collection a while ago, and that was the first of your games that I had played in since I was a kid playing the Quest Probe series. And I was just really struck by how kind of current and you know, relatable it felt. It didn't feel like it was something from 10 years before most of the adventure games I played. So all of this is just to ask, is there any chance of any of those other games coming back, like Adventureland XL, which is now on my Steam account?
Okay, to be honest, adventure games, at least the ones that I wrote, were primarily critical thinking games. They're not Twitch games, they're not designed to be speedruns. My goal was always to put a puzzle in front of the player, put lots of puzzles that all tied together, and let the player have aha moments where they felt really good when they solved a puzzle. And I hope you came away with that.
It took me 2 weeks.
Good. That's because that's what the goal was. I wanted it to be a long experience, but not too long. And that's the problem today. It can get too long. Unfortunately, Adventureland XL has the original game in it, but I couldn't resist tweaking it a little bit. One of the things I did was it now has a full sentence parser in it. So you can say, pick up the axe and throw it at the tree type thing. Besides having the original game, and now it's the Excel section, which I had fun putting in fantasy lands that I enjoyed as a kid, from Robin Hood to Tarzan type things in it. Unfortunately, at the time that I was doing Adventureland XL, it was through Clopus. I started a new company in 2016 when I thought I was retiring. As God sort of tapped me on the shoulder and says, yes, you're not retiring, you're redirecting. So I started a company. We did a game called Escape the Gloomer, which is also available on Steam. To my mind, it's probably one of the best games I ever wrote. And I didn't do it alone. This was a big team. This was very similar to what David went through. With a large team effort, we had quite a few employees. We had specific writers, like what David was doing in the game. It was a lot of fun. It was tied into a known IP. It's the Redwall series. Most people haven't heard of Redwall because they haven't been made a major motion picture yet, but for the young adult, it was fairly well known. Bottom line is, it failed. Financially, it failed. Clopus failed. We were at the borderline, okay, well, we need to do something, and that's where Adventureland XL came in. It was supposed to be a cute little simple project. It took us 6 months, once again. And the XL section's in there. And literally, you can play, no one has played it to the end. It's that big and naughty, and that's probably a mistake. So will I do other games? I don't know. But I'm thinking about, maybe my problem is not making them so big, but to go back to the smaller, bite-sized, fun games. I see heads nodding. I'll give this some thought.
Next question. That's all I have first. Okay.
So, Scott, I think you might also have been the first person to remake games. Because you re-released your text adventures a couple of years later with graphics. Basically the same game, but with graphics and confident. So I'm just curious, first of all, if, a little bit related to the last question, but first of all, either of you played the Colossal Cave remake that came out recently?
Oh, Kenny Roberta's Colossal Cave in 3D, it is incredible. No, I've never heard of it, yes.
Well, that's part one, and then part two is there any chance, any of these older games can get their hands of newer players, like I was asking before, we remade or something like that? Like basically, will newer players ever play these games, you guys both think, or is it just like, it's in the past and I'll move on, or Diablo 5 and go from there?
So I think, my son, for instance, has become a retro gamer. Like he's collecting old systems, he's playing older games, and I think there's a lot of this generation that wants to discover all of those things. So I do think they're going to be found. They want to collect the old machines. Like even up here, if you go upstairs, it's not just the older generation buying those old machines, like the younger ones are rediscovering it and buying them. So I do think there is an opportunity now to play them in their original state and not having to be remade, especially with the easy access now. Like it's much easier to distribute and go on Steam and get all of those things. So I have hope for the generation. I think they're doing great.
Adventureland XL taught me a lesson, and that is even the most simplest project is just going to blow up on you if you have feature creep. For those of you who do try Adventureland XL, it has a phone home feature that I put into it. I call it ET Phone Home. And it tells you when you read the beginning. After you play the game, if you've got access to the internet, it is going to send me an email that has your full playtest in it. And I have been going through them and looking at how people play the game, looking for bugs, and learning from it. One thing I discovered, no one has ever finished the game. 8 to 9 players in the game spend an average of 5 minutes total in the game. A lot of people say they want to play the games again, but I think they just want to try to recapture a childhood memory. Playing it for the first time, like what you did, that's a different story. You're getting the joy for the very first time. But going back to an older game like that, it doesn't seem to mean as much to people reliving it. So, and I may be wrong there, I don't know. The other thing I found is it's not financially conducive. A lot of time and effort spent into doing these games. The remuneration is just not there. For example, Steam takes, I think it's around 30% now of the take. And every quarter I get a nice email from them saying, we're sorry, we don't issue checks unless we get at least $100 worth, to give you an idea. So literally after they take their take, most quarters, matter of fact, 5 out of 6 quarters, there wasn't enough total sales to even write a check for $100. So financially it's not there. Which then brings me back to the idea of maybe simple, short adventures might be fun to people, and they might be willing to spend $5 or $10 for a simple game, playing it again for the first time from Scott Adams. I don't know. If that's the case, if anybody's interested, email me, tell me. I answer all my emails, by the way. msadams@msadams.com, same webpage, www.msadams@msadams.com. Get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from people what they're looking for and what might be fun for them. I got a lot of time and I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing. There's another game that I'm trying to put back together called Final Pilot that I did for another company. Totally different from adventure games. It's a 60-player online battle royale in space that I wrote with a team for this company. The company decided it wasn't financially feasible. They retired. They turned the game over to me. And so I'm trying to see, do I make this available again? Is there something I can monetize? I don't know. But it's a strange world, games. It really is. And I appreciate all my players that have enjoyed it. And I appreciate every one of you, because I know you gave me a piece of your life to spend time playing my games. And so I say thank you.
All right, we have time for one final question. Right.
Yeah, my question is for David. Is there anything in your games that us as players could replay right now and see and be like, that was your personal touch, as far as maybe a line of dialogue or maybe some gameplay feature, something that is your personal touch?
Okay, so if you, thank you. So if you play Skylanders, Swap Force, or Superchargers, like I wrote most of those scripts. I also wrote a company, like most of Ron Mars and I traded off, but like we all plotted them together. So if you read the comic series for Skylanders, that is more closely me, like it's less filtered, right? Because like if you're writing a game, there's a lot of checks and balances and other things, and I got to write the comics where I was like, I'm gonna bring back Malifor, and they're like, yeah, but they wouldn't let me, he wasn't in the game. So we got to do stories within the universe that were a little more emotional and a little more like exploring the character than like the big budget movie version of the game. But in Diablo, I said this at the table a couple times, I killed most of the people in Diablo. So if you're playing Diablo 4 and like somebody's dying, there's a really good chance it was me.
What legacy?
Yeah, and like
by the end called the Grim Reaper?
That's, I felt very like, when they gave me the last 2 assignments, I'm like, this is another death scene. Like, but you're so good at it. I'm like, well, okay, cool. Like, if you're gonna compliment me, yes, I will kill another person for you. But I felt like very mean by the end of the game. And there's a video of a specific character who dies in Diablo 4. The streamer just starts crying. And I love that video a lot. And for two reasons. It was just a very honest reaction, and I felt like he was a small character. He was not a large part of the game, but his death was meaningful and to that person, and I was like, oh, that was a really cool moment. And in Skylanders, we killed Glumshanks briefly, and I made children cry. They sent a recording of that. I'm gonna say, I want to say that made me feel bad, but I'm not gonna lie to you people. You came here for the truth. And the truth is, when that kid was crying because they thought I killed Glumshanks, I was delighted. So I'm sorry to that kid I starved. So that, you can check any of those things and you will see my Grim Reaper touch.
Awesome. So that's all we have time for. I want to thank David and Scott for taking the time to do this wonderful presentation panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming out. It's great having you.
And that's the end of this podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, hearing stories from the father of adventure games, Scott Adams, as well as Associate Narrative Director of Diablo IV, David A. Rodriguez. We'd also like to thank historian Martin Goldberg for heading up the panel. And I would also like to thank you for watching this week's episode. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and game on.